items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll continue on. Next up is the consent calendar. Any comments, questions on the minutes?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody
Abstain, I wasn't here.
Okay. Are you rolling along, David?
We're right with you.
Okay. Next up is item number 2, 15-V-02, Your Energy Solutions, 199 First Street. I assume there's a staff report.
Yes, I'll be brief. Planner Dahl is off tonight, and David Cornfield, the planning manager, filling in. This is a variance for a height variance to install a photovoltaic system on the property at 199 First Street. It's a commercial building at the corner of First and State. It's a 3-story building, and it's non-conforming. It exceeds our height limit of 30 feet now. The building is built to a 36.5-foot height, roughly. And they want to install some photovoltaic panels around the perimeter of the top of the building. This is an elevation view. The panels are shown in red. This is a rooftop view, and the dark rectangles are how the panels are displayed along that building. This is a variance application, and only that. By state law, we can only apply our zoning code to these types of facilities. We can't perform design review. So we're just looking at a height variance to allow these panels at 39 feet, where they otherwise would be limited to the height of the roof deck because they're unenclosed. We're supporting this variance primarily because we think there's a special circumstance given the nonconforming status of this building where any other property owner with a conforming building could put photovoltaic systems on top of their building in a conforming manner. So, but for the nonconforming height of this building, they could install this and meet the code. So we're supporting granting the height variance to allow these with one condition, that they fix the rooftop screen that's been long standing on that building, hiding other equipment that's up there. That's been in some disarray, and in fact the owner's already started fixing that up. You may have seen that in your visual survey of the building. So with that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Do we know how many kilowatts this is going to generate?
I don't, but the applicant here may be able to answer that.
It's listed in the report.
Any other questions?
33.655 kilowatt DC. It's on page 1 of Energy Solutions letter to ZAP.
17% of the building requirements, according to the letter.
I did have one question for staff, and this is in general, not about this building, but it has to do with rooftops versus mechanical items. Is there the top of the deck, as I remember, is what we measure to, and then they're allowed to have excess things on top, but it has to be screened? And is there a reason that these solar panels aren't considered like screening? Or, I mean, it's not really part of the building, but it is part of the building, you know what I mean?
As in, yeah, I mean, we're looking at them at sort of face value.
Okay.
And maybe James wants to add.
Well, that is a good question, and that's something that we posed when the application was submitted as well. We do intend to follow up to include solar and PV panels with rooftop mechanical equipment, so that these variances in the future, perhaps are not necessary.
Okay. Next would be the applicant. Are they here?
Yes.
So you have 10 minutes to present anything if
They don't have to.
you don't have to.
I don't have anything further to present that our plans don't show, but I'd be happy to talk about the project if you like.
No, only
No,
if you want to share something different.
We're just delighted to be able to do it for the building owner.
I have one one request for public comment, and Mr. Wing, you have 3 minutes. David, please. Set the timer?
Just note, before Mr. Wing speaks, we did receive a letter of support. It's on the dais there from Dr. McBurney, a property owner who has a building right down the street.
Thanks. Mr. Wing?
Okay, I'm Jim Wing. I live on Milverton Road. I do support this variance. I did a check, and probably 99% of the shoppers in Los Altos will not see these panels. You can see it from behind the Standard Liquor Store on First. You can see it when you're pumping gas at Chevron. You can see it when you walk down the sidewalk, the new sidewalk at 400 Main, where the front part is the restaurant there. You can see it from the Safeway balcony, but you can only other see it from the flower department in Safeway. You can see it from the Cranberry Scoop, and the owner of the store anyway has no problems with it. So I recommend you approve. Thank you.
Okay, I will close public comment.
I would just like to,
Make a motion?
Do we want to just move with?
Well, I'd like to make a public comment.
Okay.
Make
Sure.
some comment. We have a non-conforming building. It's above the height in the district. And the question is, do we allow a building to be, because it's already over the height limit in the district, to be taller? And I'm not finding the rationale to support a building that's already over the height limit in the district being taller. Now, it so happens it's being asked to be taller because it's doing something good, but that's a judgment. The simple fact is it's taller than what we allow, and we don't ask people if their building is too tall to cut the building down, but do we allow people to raise the building above its height? And I haven't heard anything from in the documentation here that would make me want to support that. And if one of my fellow commissioners has a different perspective, and Phoebe's getting ready to pounce here, and maybe
Same
others,
here.
I'd love to hear it, because I'm a little bit at a loss here.
Phoebe,
And I
you
do
wanna go
support
first?
solar energy. It is unfortunate that this building only supplies 17% of its requirements
Is that
with solar
17 or
panels.
70?
What?
17 or 70?
1.7. And it's unfortunate that it can't be configured in a way that it's within the enclosed area so that it would be not something that required a variance. So if any of my fellow commissioners have anything to say that would give me a different perspective, I would welcome it.
okay, so I can jump in.
Please, be nice.
Go ahead.
Couple of things. I think, what our position here is to look at the variance and the findings and see if we can support it. And basically, it's an existing building. I wish they were 100% solar, but they can't. They have mechanical equipment up there, they have screening. They've actually done a pretty good job of maximizing whatever they can up there, and they have to follow the angle, which sometimes I think is ugly because you see the back of it, but I mean, you have to put the solar panels wherever you get the maximum usage of it. In my eyes, I think we can support the finding and the variance because you have property owners who are actually have the privilege of putting these solar panels in. And for us to hold somebody, all our properties by the in downtown and our parking lot should have solar in my eyes. But if somebody is trying to do something where it's an existing building, it's not a new building that they, came in with and we shot them down, I think they should be allowed to enjoy the privilege what other property owners in downtown are doing. And it's something which benefits the community, and it's a good thing. We should be encouraging people to put these systems on rather than,
So, but if somebody
holding
wanted to
them back.
put a decorative railing of 3.5 feet on a non-conforming building, we're
It
gonna
doesn't
give-
benefit the community.
It
This
doesn't, and
benefits
it's
the
a state
community.
thing, right? I mean, we
But
are
we're-
trying
but
to
we're
encourage
making
people
it-
to be green.
But my point is, we're making a judgment that we're allowing people to increase height because we think it's something good. And that's a judgment that we're making.
It's not a
Au
good thing.
contraire.
It's-
Not a
It's
judgment,
green.
okay.
It's a
Right.
sustainable
Not
energy.
a judgment, it's a fact.
So are you?
Please help me understand.
It's simple.
So why don't we have everybody go through and speak, and then, John, you can.
I mean, I'll just wrap it
I'll
up
give you-
because I think it's a very personal thing. But as a city, we took the first plunge to be a green city, and we, I think, are kind of losing that as we're moving forward. And if somebody is coming in front of us and they're willing to invest this much amount of money and put something in there, it's not a railing, it's not decoration, they're not adding height, it's not for some functional purposes, it's something good for the environment and for the building. I think we should encourage it. So that's
Oh, me, oh, me.
Okay, Phoebe.
So in fact, I go back to what I thought Malka was going to talk about, which is, it's a variance. It has to meet the three requirements of the variance. And does it do harm? No. That's irrespective that it does good, but the state mandate is, does it do harm? No. Do they have a unique circumstance? Yes. They have a very unusual, non-conforming building in a very prominent place in town. And the third thing is, does it meet the objectives of our zoning plan? And the fact is, I go back to what James had said, which is, if this is the tip of an iceberg, and I think our code will be modified to include this as part of the mechanical equipment, which would have been allowed anyway. And so, does it meet the intent of the zoning code, which is to support the good quality of life in town? Yes. And so, for me, this is a no-brainer. I appreciate the fact that if I had my druthers, this building would not be as tall as it is. But it's been here a very long time, longer than I have. And I've been in town a long time. So I look at this and I say, here is an opportunity that is completely in conformance with the required findings for variance. And on top of that, it supports a bigger goal of the town, which is to encourage as much energy production off the grid as possible. So I can support this with the findings.
Mr. Chairman, it's not directly related, but it might be of interest tonight because people do wonder how this three-story building got built downtown. It was approved and built after the city incorporated and after the city adopted its zoning codes. The initial zoning codes for downtown allowed buildings up to 35 feet in height with no story limit. Later, it was limited to two-story buildings, primarily as a result of impacts to the parking plaza, parking demand. Later, then further reduced to 30 feet in height, and then later further limited to 100% FAR of the site area unless the project's parked. So that's just kind of a little interesting history on when the building was approved and how it was approved.
So can I ask James just a clarifying question? James, mechanical equipment, is there a requirement of a setback on mechanical equipment?
No, just a height limit.
And no height limit? So it's just that it has to be screened from public view?
Screened and a height limit, yes.
There is a height limit?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 42 inches or something above the top of the roof.
I'm sorry, how
Be
long?
8 feet above.
How
This
much?
one's 8 feet.
8 feet.
It could be 8 feet above
okay,
a
8 feet.
conforming roof.
8 feet above,
A
but
conforming
screened.
roof deck.
Okay, and screening, but no setback requirement from the edge.
That's right.
Okay.
So I'll finish off on the left side.
So I'm inclined to approve this variance, because I agree with all the reasons that have been stated. But the one thing I would say is that my expectation is that everyone that comes after this will be held to the same standard, meaning this variance should be granted to everyone that follows. So, I mean, any non-conforming building that comes before us,
This doesn't set precedent. Variances don't set precedent.
I know it doesn't, but my expectation, though, is that if we are opening the door, so to
No, we're
speak,
not.
to the...
No,
We're
but
not.
we-
It doesn't set precedent. We're
No,
not
but-
opening.
But we
the
can
door.
bring it as a separate discussion point for us to visit this, to see if we
Right, well,
want to
it
do
says,
something
it
about
says
it.
later that staff is currently investigating
Right.
changing the code.
Yeah, but that,
So
yeah.
my presumption is that one building in all of downtown wouldn't get this special exemption.
Unless there's a land rush of people putting solar panels on non-conforming buildings in the downtown.
Would that be a problem?
So here's my question. Can you find the findings for this? Forget what we would happen in future, but the findings on the sheet, if we can do they support this
Right.
project?
And I do, but what I hate is when we make a variance that, benefits one building, and then someone comes to us with a very
But that's-
similar situation, and the findings conclude the same, and we somehow find an inconsistent
Well,
decision.
this is one of the questions, which is if we require screening, why is this building not being required to screen?
You
I mean,
can't screen
again,
solar.
I'm just trying to ask to understand here. I'm not,
Sure.
this is not, my position is not intended to be adversarial. I'm just trying to understand.
How do you screen solar?
Well, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak before, because
No,
Renee, you're done?
yeah, that was my,
Jerry, do you have anything?
If this building, if this was a developer that was coming before us saying, I want to build this building today and put in solar panels, I would vote no, but it's not. It's an existing building that was built many, many years ago, and all they're asking for is a variance, so I would vote to approve.
Ken?
I mean, I think this is an absolute no-brainer. First of all, the solar panels are almost invisible, number one. Number two is they're substantially lower than the fence. And in future buildings, there's no question that they would be inside the fence. This building is an existing building. It exceeds the height limit. There's no point in threatening to lower it to meet the height limit. I mean, we do this all the time for houses that were built in the 1940s and so forth before Los Altos had a code. If this were something that were solely a benefit to the owner of the building, then the answer is no. If it were a developer who was developing a new building, as Jerry just mentioned, the answer is no. This is an existing building. The application is for something that will benefit the community and benefit the entire Bay Area. And to deny it because of a technicality is, in my view, silly. So I absolutely support it.
I just want to give my comment, which was, when I looked at this, I think there are two factors that I thought about. Was one, the panels themselves are sloped not at a very, I mean, it's very low at the front and slopes to the back. It almost acts like a screen because solar panels are screen, they're you can't see through.
Well, one side is not. This side, you see the
Right,
underside.
you'll see the
You see the
underside.
underside of the solar.
But that's, that's the only thing, and that's the parking lot side.
Right.
But the rest of it is sloped to the screen, so it really ends up, and that was my question about mechanical, and really why isn't this just treated like everything else that's on that roof, rather
Yeah,
than
I
the
think
height of the
if
roof?
you could screen it, you would. The way the roof is configured, you just can't do it.
Right.
I looked at how they've tried to maximize the number of solar panels. That's the way this is configured.
Right.
If they tried to put fencing around it, they would shadow the solar panels in the wintertime, and so it's not practical. If this were a new building, they wouldn't do it this way.
And I think, when we visit that down the road, what we're talking about screening, we can look at, maybe the panels which are at an angle get screened, but not everything else, because you're
Right.
shading it.
So you could conceivably put a screen on, if you look at the front elevation on the left side, on the parking lot side,
Right.
to screen the bottom side of the solar panels.
So would you be amenable to a requirement that where it's feasible to screen, that we make the applicant screen it? I'm just looking for some level of understanding.
where it
as
wouldn't
to-
interfere with shading.
Like that left side, right, where you see the,
There's only one side which slopes, right?
That
Well,
seems
there are
reasonable.
computer programs that will allow the installer to determine whether or not something will cause a shadow to fall on the solar panels.
I would love to ask the applicant the question of the feasibility of screening, of selective screening. So
do you want to respond to that?
there's nothing like us trying to play solar engineers from the dais.
Well, I think it's the design of the solar panels of being exposed on the parking lot side.
Right.
Go ahead.
Is it possible, thank you, is it possible, can I request that we go back one slide so we can see the layout of the panels on the roof? And the part in question, which section of panels are we addressing?
One's on the upper side.
The ones on the top, right?
That'll be facing southeast. So all of these panels are, this is a foam roof, and so we have to use a certain type of a mounting mechanism so that we can, the building owner's in the process of actually re-roofing and making a lot of improvements to the building and certainly to the top of the building. And so it was mentioned that there's an 8-foot fence that acts as a shield for some equipment that's in the center of the building. And so I know I spoke with the owner, and he's actually, I don't know if he's repairing the fence or if he's completely replacing the fence, but certainly he's going to make it look new. And so one of the challenges that we had is we had to keep the panels. We have a couple constraints. We've got the fire department that has commercial photovoltaic ingress and egress rules for firefighters. If they have to get on the roof, they have to have a safe path to work for. So actually, at the perimeter of the building, on the outside of all of the panels, there's a 4-foot path for firefighter ingress and egress. So if you couple that with the slope that we have for the solar panels are actually on a 15-degree pitch. So the front or the part of the panel that's lowest to the roof will be about 4 to 6 inches off of the roof deck, and that's so that the roof over time can be serviced by the roofing company so they can maintain the foam roof that's going on. And the back is actually on a 15-degree pitch, 22 to 24 inches. I know it's right in that range. It certainly doesn't exceed 24 inches. And so my question would be, I'm sure as you get further away from the building and your line of sight is different, you have a different angle. If you're standing close, it's a very sharp angle. If you stand far away, you have a different perspective. But with the panels only being 2 feet off of the roof deck and being 4 feet back from the edge of the building, it'd be difficult to see them unless you have a far perspective of the building. So that's kind of just to highlight what we're doing.
Yeah, I think the question, if we can go to PV4, can we skip 2 slides forward? What I think we're asking is, if you see the top right side of this diagram, the framing cross-section, is it possible to put something beneath the solar panel itself on that part?
It's
In the back.
the left side.
In the
Yeah, but I
back.
know, but I'm talking about this right here, this right there.
Oh,
So on the highest leg, you're asking if we could put a screen behind that entire...
On just the one
Plane.
side
So you wouldn't see the underside of the panel.
from the parking lot?
We haven't built that into our design. Anything is possible. This is of course it can be done. I mean, if that's what's going to make the project get approved, would
But
be...
it doesn't take
think
away
the-
from the integrity
yeah.
of the system, does it?
Not at all. It won't cause any shading. We're just going to have to redesign part of the system because the type of structure that we have that's supporting the panels, from my knowledge, I don't believe that there's a windscreen that's available for this type of a structural mount, but there are mounts that we can certainly look at that would have the screening built in. The screening does come in, so I just want to address this. It's a sheet metal. They don't offer it powder-coated or colored, so I'm not sure if it would be better to have a sheet metal that would be light reflective, because it has to be aluminum so it holds up to the elements.
Can it be an independent screen? You don't have to attach it to your solar.
Well, the solar is actually becoming part of a physical structure, and so if we don't attach it, then we have to go into we're building a physical structure that can withstand wind and tie into the roof, and then there's other challenges.
So you usually, typically, for any kind of flashing on roofs, there's a requirement that those get painted. That's, David, am I correct on that? Any kind of metal flashing, which that would be typically a requirement.
I see.
Well, why does it have to be metal?
I
It's a funny
don't
thing
know
to
the answer.
ask.
I'm just reacting to
Could be
Mr.
nylon-
material
could
choice.
be
Mesh, some
Could be
sort of-
nylon screening.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just note
Sure.
that David, in his staff report comments, the state law doesn't allow cities to do design review of solar or
we've
PV
been there.
panels.
Yes.
That's intentional to encourage these facilities, so we really are starting to get into the design discussion.
I agree.
I would just
this
like
is-
to move forward and approve.
Yeah, this is not.
I move
Sorry.
that we approve application V, 15V02, subject to the findings and conditions in our staff report for 199 First Street.
I'll second that.
Second.
Second there. And is there any further discussion on the matter, John? Nope. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay, and I'm voting no because we are not requiring screening where screening would be to the consistent with our letter and spirit of our mechanical requirements.
Okay. So the motion carries 6-1.
Thank you.
Next up is a discussion item on the neighborhood traffic management plan. I believe staff goes first.
I should tell you that it made for great reading.
I found it a little staccato myself, but
So, Mr. Chairman, unless David has a staff report to give, this was an agenda item that the commission requested, so it's
Right.
really just a discussion item for the commission.
Okay.
I don't have anything further.
Okay.
I was a little skeptical about the prices until I realized it was from 2005.
So then would be the next thing to have public comment?
Yes.
Yep. So, Mr. Wing, I have a item.
I'm Jim Wing, I live on Milverton Road, and I am a veteran of NTMP for many years. The 2005 procedure you have in front of me is detrimental to the community fiber of our neighborhoods because it teaches people to be traffic engineers. What typically happens at meetings is that everybody comes and everybody knows how to solve the problem. There becomes a heated discussion of 3 or 4 different design arrangements. People become frustrated, and basically some walk up and leave, and it becomes gridlock. And people walk away from NTP, don't want anything to do with it. It doesn't work. The NTMP procedure needs to clearly state, and it's in the procedure technically, but nobody knows it, that the only thing that the neighbors can do is define the problem. A traffic engineer using data, which neighbors do not have, is the only one who can do traffic or calming design. That's in the California Vehicle Code. That is the law. Now, in my letter, I said, really, let's get this condensed to where people can get the right expectation. And it's a tricky thing to do to actually sell this point, because I have tried and I have failed. That people cannot be traffic engineers, just happened with solar design engineering. You really are in the best position to write an executive summary that sells that point and really makes it clear to we residents. You work conflicts amongst neighbors all the time. You have experience. You have neighbors and you talk to them and you debate with them. So you know what they will listen to. And also, some of you are very, very skilled in words, and you can really write very well. So if you hire a consultant, the consultant doesn't live here, doesn't really know the neighborhoods. And one problem with consultants, they get paid by the pound. And so therefore we get thick stuff. And people never read it, basically, unless it's got pictures in it. If staff does it, they also kind of struggle with knowing how to interface with neighbors. How can you convince neighbors? Plus, staff has a large workload. So I think this is a task that you could have a small subcommittee, take a crack. You only need to write the executive summary. And my letter, I noted some technical things there to kind of open up the process. But I think this is a task which I would certainly encourage you to undertake. Thank you.
I have a question for him. Are you specifically referring to the part that says that each potential plan requires a 66 2/3 approval threshold of the voting property owners and 100% approval of all property owners adjacent to the solution? Are you saying let's take that out of the equation?
I think that was wrong,
No.
right?
No.
No. In my letter, I hope as it got sent to you, you could see the color range. So I took, there's a procedural steps. There's around 2 pages of that, and then there's a financial page. Now, those that were developed by the Traffic Commission in 2005 really kind of work, except that some of them, the requirements in there don't allow us to address the current traffic problems we have, which is AM or PM cut-through traffic, which is just a peak of volume traffic that really causes problems in the neighborhood. And basically, when you go into NTMP, let's take, for example, Milverton Road. The last time that the city counted cars on Milverton Road, and the day count was 181. Since then, we're clipping at now about 150 cars cutting through in the PM commute in kind of the 4 to 7 range or so. Add that to it, and you get close to 400 or so. But the requirement to qualify for NTMP is 800. So, and actually, most local streets that have this cut-through problem are in the same boat. We don't qualify for volume. And then, if you read closely the California Vehicle Code, when you do the 85 percentile, when you count the speeds of your 126 cars, that all has to be done in normal hours, and the PM commute is not considered normal hours. So basically, most of our streets in normal hours, we don't meet the base. I guess it's 32 anyway. So therefore, that was the type of adjustments I was looking at, is to do that. But the 100% and the 66%, I wasn't proposing any changes to those.
Any other questions for Mr. Wing? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll open it up for discussion. You want to start over here?
No, you can start.
I was going to start with the boys.
I had something
my
to
right.
say, I was just in know what anything to say.
Yeah. Do you want to go, Jerry?
I don't have any comments now, I might.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, I do have some comments. As somebody who was involved very early on in the original NTMP, there were great hopes and expectations that this would solve problems for neighborhoods. And my anecdotal experience with it has been that it has not done what it had high hopes for the neighborhoods. Mr. Wing talks about some of the problems. I can tell you that the Hawthorne Avenue was trying to do something, and basically because of the small number of houses on a short street, that ultimately they couldn't get over the threshold. And so you had most of the residents who wanted it, but it wasn't enough because essentially you had a blocking vote. In the 15-plus years since the Neighborhood Traffic Management Task Force was formed, cut-through traffic has gotten worse. And we haven't made a lot of progress. So I'm in favor of doing something, either throwing the document out and saying we don't have a neighborhood traffic management plan and let's not fool ourselves, or looking at it and saying, how do we make it so it actually works, so that it addresses the real concerns that the neighbors have, much of which, frankly, is being created not by the neighborhoods. It's being created by increased traffic on El Monte, increased traffic on San Antonio Road, increased traffic on El Camino. And
Foothill Expressway.
And Foothill Expressway.
And Foothill Expressway, and it's a bit of a shell game. And we're saying essentially to the neighborhoods, or what we're giving to the neighborhoods is, this isn't a program that works because it counts average, not peak. It's not a program that works because, frankly, we're making the neighborhoods don't have a choice on what the solution is, and they just get to vote yay or nay. And the neighborhoods then get the insult of footing half the cost, very often for a problem that they didn't create. And, every year the city council puts money aside for this, and they can put as much money or as little as they want because it doesn't matter. it never gets used. And I would tell you that that's my definition of a program which is a failure in this community. And maybe that's heresy, but I think after 15 years, I don't see very many examples of traffic calming. We've got a couple of examples of traffic calming that are abysmal failures, North Clark being one example. And it would be nice if we had something that really worked and really addressed the needs of the community, or simply say we don't have anything. So that's my 2 cents worth. And if the way to get it done is to form a small group, that's great. But I can also tell you that the people who really know what the problems are not us. It's the people who've gone through the process before, and it's not worked in their neighborhoods, or they never even got to square one or square two. So I'm in favor of us either fixing it or throwing it away.
Mr. Chairman, just to put the options in context, and those comments were very good, thank you. Commissioner Bear understands the program probably as well as anybody, being a part of it for as long as he has. So the options really are not to review the program tonight, but to either forward a recommendation to the City Council to create a project for the engineering staff to work on to update the NTMP, or to agree to take it on as a commission and perhaps a subcommittee to look at in public, study session type meetings to draft recommendations directly to the City Council.
So I'm in favor of, getting specific targeted community input. I mean, general community input is good, but I think also specifically trying to solicit input from groups and neighborhoods who've tried it and the outcome has not been favorable, or maybe in some cases it has, because you can learn from the successes and the failures, but also solicit from the people who've tried it and never got to a successful endpoint and understand why it didn't work. And if that can be done by staff, that's great. If it needs to be done by a subcommittee of this group, it may be ultimately more efficient and timely.
So in either method, that kind of direct contact or direct noticing for participation can be done. I think if it is directed to be a staff work program item, it's going to be put on their priority list in terms of when they're able to get to it.
So I just want to make sure, so what we're saying is either make a recommendation that City Council direct staff to do something. We as a commission, do we create a subcommittee? That would be a proposal, or that we would take it on as a whole? That would be 2 different options.
Right.
And the third option, which isn't that you didn't mention, was do nothing. Right?
Exactly. That's a good point. That, of course, is an option. That's why this is just a discussion item tonight.
Right.
It could be taken on by the commission as a whole. I think it would be more effective to be taken on as a subcommittee.
Okay.
So I guess my first inclination is take it on. We certainly have enough meetings we cancel that we could devote a session to rolling up our sleeves and actually doing some useful work besides
Do you see the
voting yea or
subcommittee
nay.
being just,
Do you see it as a subcommittee or
Do it as the group.
it's the whole?
I mean, I think if you do it as a group, you invite, you targeted mailings to the people, and hopefully they're going to come in, and, we'll invite the general public as well. I mean, we'd like to, I think the broader our comments and the feedback, the more useful a document we're going to produce, and, and would certainly want to get staff's
Okay.
input too, 'cause
Ken, do you have anything?
Yeah. So when I read that, I was actually appalled by how complicated it was. It borders on, in my mind, it borders on the ridiculous. It's so involved of how many meetings and who has to say what and who has to pay for what and how many people, what percentage has to do this and what percentage has to do that. It's craziness. There's a serious problem in town. There's people who run stop signs all the time, people who speed on streets. I live near Hawthorne Street, which is not only is it a cut-through street, but people enjoy it as a drag strip. John lives on a street that's exactly the same way. And Jim Wing makes an excellent point. Once you get people in a meeting and everyone tries to design it, then people get discouraged. It's so complicated. So many meetings are required. And it's really insulting that the city makes the neighborhoods pay for half of it. That is ridiculous. The city should pay certainly more than half. I think the city should pay for the whole thing. It should be easier to get this done. So if we're just going to leave it the way it is, we ought to just get rid of it. It's just stupid the way it is. So why don't we do something that's reasonable, whether we have the engineering staff work on it, or if we have, as John suggests, have us work on it, or have us work together and have public input. Any of those things is fine. The way it is now, it's just useless.
So do you have a preference for those three?
I'll support anything because I think it's really, seriously, I think
Okay.
it's really important to have this. It's a useful thing to do. The ones that have been done, I think, are outrageous. The one on North Clark is just silly. I mean, I don't know whose idea that was, whether it was a traffic engineer or someone had a nightmare, but it's just unbelievable. My wife gets nervous every time we drive on that street. And you can see the tire marks on those bulb outs.
Yeah, okay.
What does that mean? Someone's been hitting them. Plus, there's kids and pedestrians on that. That kind of stuff is just ridiculous. And you go on the Mountain View side, and there's speed humps, which, of course, Los Altos doesn't want because we're a village and we don't have speed humps in our village. But it's actually effective. It slows you down. So, I'm not done yet. I get to talk.
I know you do.
I get to talk.
I'm just letting.
So, I would like to support whatever discussion, input, change mechanism people think is reasonable. I will be happy to support that.
Jerry, did you want to say something now that?
I've had a little tirade, that's all right.
You know, you-
Periodically, I have a tirade.
The reason why I didn't say anything the first time is I was so confused by trying to digest this document that I didn't even know how to comment on it. It's so overwhelming
That's what I
that
said.
it's like someone saying, well, okay, you've just read the dictionary, please explain what you said. I have no idea what I read. It's too complicated.
It's way too complicated.
So do you have a preference on what action we should take?
Well, from my standpoint, I would go to the experts. I would think it would be more reasonable if staff, with their ability to access engineers, would come up with a plan, and then we as the commissions would review it. And it may take more than one meeting, but
And John's suggestion of getting input from the public, I think, is not a bad idea. I mean, if people want to
the
comment
only
on
problem
this.
I see with the public is that everyone that comes in here has their own agenda about their own street. So
That's okay. I mean, we can listen to
Well, it
that.
isn't okay, because what we're trying to do is to come up with a document that generalizes the situation. If you listen to public comment, you're going to get, well, my street, because if you want, I'll talk about my street. I mean, it's a problem.
But I
Yours
think,
is a problem.
no, but my intention, look, if we ask for public comment, people can say whatever they
I
want.
want to make sure that the other side gets.
But-
They've talked plenty. They'll
But,
get to
but
talk.
if you specifically target people and neighborhoods who've gone through it, hopefully out of that input, we're going to learn what are the pieces that didn't work
John,
for the
you
neighborhood.
can't find a neighbor that hasn't gone through it. Every neighborhood in this city has a cut-through problem.
No, have gone through the NTMP.
I'm on a dead end.
That's my point. There are something like 11 neighborhoods, or 17 neighborhoods, David? James, there's a finite number of neighborhoods who've gone through NTMP, many of which did not qualify on the initial cut, and then certain ones went through a more formal engineering study, and, I mean, the fallout at each stage, so there were a number of them, and if you got input from those, you at least understand from the user perspective what worked, what didn't, where they got confused, where the rules, we already heard from Mr. Wing, where one rule creates an unintended consequence. We presumably have other things in here that, whether you want traffic calming or not traffic calming, at least we understand what those issues are, so as we try and scope out how to simplify a plan and make it more usable in town, that we've at least scoped out what the points are that don't necessarily work.
So what I'd like to do is.
I could debate him all night.
I know, exactly. That's why I'd like to hear from the other side.
Can I just
Wait, wait,
interrupt?
wait. Can we hear from the other commissioners
yeah.
before, and to get kind of a census, and then
Would you
we can
like
have
to
a-
go first?
No, I'm just going to, off the topic. You guys don't have to stay, but you're more than welcome to listen to us. I just feel like you're in the back, but you're mean,
You're talking about the guys that...
The solar
Yeah.
panel guys,
Yeah, I
you're
mean, if
done.
you
You can
want-
leave if you want.
Yeah, just letting you know. I mean, you don't have to be here.
I know we're fascinating, but
Yes, please.
We're not changing our votes.
Can I?
You're good. So
Volunteer,
you
can I
guys can
So
head
we
up. That's all I was saying. Phoebe, go for it.
That's very nice.
if you would like to go first, it's fine with me. I have my notes, I'll read them.
We're now listening to the left side.
So I
Good
was,
thinking.
I was
They
going to
didn't realize.
propose a fourth
Option.
and that would be to continue this discussion and suggest that we avail ourselves of having this discussion with our engineer. I mean, with Cedric here. I'm not certain that it is. I haven't received, I feel like, compelling data that this is a total and colossal failure. I live in a neighborhood where I believe it was implemented successfully.
Where's that?
I live near Montclair. And
What did they do?
they did a whole host of different measures. But my issue is that it shouldn't be our own, personal stories of our street. But I'd like to hear from, the city, how many people are doing this in a given year? How many pass that first threshold? What then happens with those? I'd like to have that kind of data. I mean, what you said when you were reading this, you were, startled by some information. What I found surprising was like the lack of supporting data. There was just, I think one study was referenced in this whole report, and then everything else just said, children at play signs
Don't work.
Studies show that. There's no reference to a study that what the date of the study is. It's like hearsay. I mean, when I read this, it talked about traffic signals and says, usually they increase rear end type. There's not even a study reference. It doesn't even say a study said that this happened. So what I found was that I'm guessing that the reason they require people to pony up is because from reading this, none of these things actually work. A speed limit sign doesn't work. Crosswalks, apparently you're 6 times more likely to get hit in a crosswalk
I
than
love
outside
that
a
one.
crosswalk.
I love that one.
So why bother doing that? Children at play sign doesn't work. Traffic signals increases rear end. Stop signs.
That's it.
So,
Well, if you believe all of those, by the way, we should just get rid of all the crosswalks, traffic signals, stop signs,
Well,
and children at play signs,
they're-
because they're increasing our accidents.
but residents say, I want all of it, regardless of whether
No, the
it makes
traffic
any sense. So
engineer-
it makes
the traffic-
sense that they should have to pony up a little bit.
The traffic
to-
engineer comes in and says, here's what I believe will be effective. The residents, as Jim pointed out, the residents don't design it, the traffic engineer does.
Okay, so that to me seems like a reasonable
Yeah,
way.
that's-
So that is not a flaw in the program, in my
Right.
mind. So what I would like to do is have a further discussion, getting actual data on how this program is working and being implemented before we suggest to council that they destroy it or that we create a subcommittee.
We got
that-
that data
Let
previously.
Ronit talk.
Are there areas for improvement? I'm interested in hearing what staff thinks the specific areas for improvement are, because perhaps they can fix it and are more experienced in this.
Ronit, I think the flaw in the
Implementation.
program is that it's not being implemented enough, not that it,
That's what you're telling me here. I
Yes.
have not heard that.
Well, talk to Jim.
Okay, and that's one resident,
yeah,
A very good one.
right?
a good one.
But there's no big outcry from
So
the
let's-
community that this isn't working.
so let's
I
get
don't
some
hear
data.
a room full of people. But if we do put it on the calendar and we
Right.
do really solicit to get more feedback from people who have gone through it, then I think that would be
Which is
useful.
what John suggested.
I don't know if we suggested the same thing, actually.
Which one?
Actually, I did.
Phoebe, you want to go
Okay.
next?
So I also read through this, and I thought the reason that we were doing this was because Waze, the app, was making what was originally a town problem worse. Waze is an app that is it's on your phone, it's current. When you're driving, it says, take a left here and go through this, so you'll miss a little bit of traffic here, and take another right here and you'll miss that. And so it is the new way that people are, in certain parts of town, cutting off our arterials to cut through the city streets, not that the neighborhoods that they weren't doing it before, but now it is scientifically algorithmed, so they are very effective, and people are using it a lot, and that will, I think, increase. That's why I thought we were looking at this. Then I read the document, and I agree, I think it's pretty Kafkaesque. I have some personal opinions about who should pay for it and why it makes sense to have the neighborhood get some skin in the game. But reading it was entertaining, to say the very least. But there were a couple of pieces that got to me, which is, I have a long-standing prejudice, which I know staff is aware of, that I believe that often our traffic reports that we get as part of our applications are equally Kafkaesque and sometimes counterintuitive. And I know, because whenever I comment, I am remonstrated by, but this is what they do, this is what traffic studies do, this is the way traffic studies work, and it's hard to defend it to the public when it seems counterintuitive. I'm not a traffic engineer, I just look at it and say, this doesn't make sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me here is, I believe we have a two-step issue. One is to define the problem, and I think the problem, as Jim Wing pointed out, is the way the program is based now is based on a traffic engineering mode which doesn't take into account what I think Waze is doing, which is taking the peak times when children are going to school and people are going to work and then kids are leaving school, those two peak periods, which are not necessarily the maximum number of cars, but it's the time we are most concerned about cars going down, say, a 3-block stretch that's not signalized at all, picking up some speed, and there are some kids walking down the street. And so that's what I see is a piece of it. And if we can define what the problem is, I don't feel capable of fixing it. Because as many of my fellow commissioners pointed out, it appears from this document that none of the things that we would think of that would make it better are actually making it better. And so if that's the case, I think we need some creative traffic engineering to say, look, when you have something like Waze, here's what we do. We call Waze and we say, get us out of your algorithm. Get us out. We don't want these streets to be included in your algorithm. And you go directly to the horse's mouth and say, University Avenue between El Monte and Edith should not be allowed in your algorithm, because if you do that, we're going to close it off. Because if we do something temporary, as with putting a police officer, for example, there, to say, slow down, when they're gone, Waze will put it back through there again, because it's an at-the-moment app. So I look at this and say, if the problem is that people are cutting through our neighborhoods during the time that we're most concerned, which is children in the street during the high transport, let's design a solution that works with that. And if it turns out that it's inflated bollards that go up and shut off these neighborhood streets to force traffic to stay on the arterials, I'm making it up, but maybe there's a solution and Cedric can help us with that. So my recommendation, as what would I recommend, is that we can, if we choose as a commission, all of us or a subcommittee can try to analyze the problem by hashing it over to define it, bring in public input at that point to say, well, for us, maybe 12 noon in my neighborhood, 12 noon is really bad. I don't know. It would be interesting to hear. My take is at certain times of day, but I think public input is a great idea. It goes to us purely to define the problem, not to come up with a solution. And then we turn to staff and we say, council, could we have some staff time, please, to find us the best possible panoply of solutions? And we're not even going to touch the who pays for it, how do you get your neighborhood to get it allowed. That threshold, I think, is something that I would leave to the staff to do professionally as part of our general approach. But knowing what the possible solutions are, I think, is something that I'm really delighted we have a really good traffic engineer on board, and I feel like he is up to date with what's going on. This is 10 years old and nothing works. Surely we are not reinventing the wheel here. Someone must be dealing with this, even if it's something that pops up and goes down. So That's what I would recommend to council, is that we either partially or entirely search for the problem with public input, and then once we define the problem, we turn it over to two-pronged approach, staff to figure out what the program is that they'd like to propose that we can then hash out here, and our professional traffic staff to say, these don't work, here are some new solutions, let's talk about them.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? Mrs. President? Who defines the process? Because there have been some comments about the document and the process.
I wasn't even going to do, process, I think, comes after.
And
that's
that
why I
would
was.
be staff,
I
or-
thought that was staff, and we can work with staff on that. Staff will say, here's what we've come up with, and then we'll do our usual tinkering up here.
Okay.
But first identify what are the problems, what are the areas of improvement?
Because we start by hearing neighborhood cut-through is a problem. Traffic is something people care a lot about, and it's getting worse. Okay, that's a priori starting point. Now, can we refine it so that we can come up with a solution? Because there's big traffic problem. Let's put a fence around the whole town. People aren't allowed to drive in it. We'll turn it into a total bicycle city. There's a solution. Not going to happen, but if
Mike
we
would
can,
like
if we could refine it so that it would be easier to come up with solutions. I believe they're out there. We just don't know what they are yet.
So I have a mix of, I think, what I've heard here is mostly what I was thinking, but I would like to kind of touch base a little bit on ways. I think we talked about it last time also. I think as a city, I understand that's a concern, but I think we are in an age where we can't be fighting technology. Waze is not the only one. It's been bought out by, I think, Google. It's part of all now your navigation systems. Who else are you going to shut down, right? Even right now, the minimal, like I think Honda even has a navigation
Yep.
which cuts you through. So people are going to cut through. I don't think we can stop them. I also don't think, as I think most of us have said up here, we're all looking at our neighborhood, or we've heard from our friends, or we'd heard from somebody else as to what's happening in there. But, we are representing or trying to take care of a problem for a whole city. So I think first, it is very important for us to get feedback. I think, we all have been doing this for a while. I think we can kind of detach ourselves from people who are focusing just on their neighborhood. The idea is not that we are listening from them just about their neighborhood. I think the idea is to see what has worked in which neighborhood, what has not worked. And maybe in the same neighborhood, one thing might have worked and something might have not worked. Also, this was great reading, but I know Phoebe is also, we're kind of used to reading this kind of stuff. So it didn't bother me, but we are used to it. But I want to listen from a neighbor who actually went through this process, what they think about this document. And I can understand Jerry's concern because we've seen it where, when neighbors come, sometimes things go out of hand. But I think 7 of us up here can detach ourselves from that, but just at least get the essence out of what worked, what didn't. So I think that's very important to hear before we even take it forward and start discussing between us, because those people are like real time doing this. And then I know the question came up was who's paying, and I know some of us have said we can look at it separately. Right now, in my eyes, anything we can do in the city, if the city doesn't have the budget for it, or if things are not there, at least right now there is some resource out there for somebody to do something till we figure out what's the best way of cleaning it up. So I personally think the process should be a mix of what everybody has said. I have to agree with Ronit. That was going to be my first point. We have no data, right? None of us are experts here. We are just neighbors, just like everybody else. We can just say what's happening down the street from us. We need real data to really make a decision, or at least come up with some suggestions that can go to council or to staff. So first, we need data. We need to have, I think, an outreach, even if a study session or whatever it is, an informal, where we can get some feedback from the community. If they feel strongly about it, they'll show up, and we'll hear it. So I think that's important. And then we form a subcommittee, or what we do. I think we need to take it step by step rather than deciding exactly this is the path we are going to follow, because we know when things come forward, it might be very fluid. We might decide to have a subcommittee be really dedicated to it, or just dedicate a few of our sessions as a whole to something like this. But I think before we go to council or take step of asking staff to do something, I think we need what Ronit said, we need the data, we need the engineer to give us a little bit feedback and background from his end, and then hear from public, and then we can have a meeting to decide what should be our next step. At least that's my take.
I'd like to point out that what Mako was referring to is if you think this is Kafkaesque, you should read the building code. Because in some ways it was very reminiscent of that. And it
That's
also
what it reminded
me
me of.
of the neighborhood single-story overlay, which was an equally very, for someone who deals with the building or zoning codes, makes perfect sense. But from a user-friendly perspective, it really isn't user-friendly, and none of the codes are.
Right.
So-
But the good news is that in those cases, people usually hire architects. In the case of the neighborhood traffic management plan, people, the intended audience is the non-professional community resident who's trying to solve a problem in their neighborhood. And I think that's where the disconnect is.
Couldn't the same be said of us? I mean, who here on this panel, and I'm not discounting the brain power, we have business people with architects, et cetera, so, but who among us can take on this kind of a task? I don't feel qualified. I really don't. And I probably know more about these kinds of things than most of us here, but I'm not qualified to analyze data that would come in on traffic.
And-
on a neighbor. I'm not capable of doing that.
But Jerry, that's why we are suggesting that we take one step at a time and not make a decision on the whole process.
So that's my point.
Reach
That's
out.
my point is, I don't think we're the first step.
Do you feel you're confident enough to define the problem?
Right, that's where I
Yeah, we
really
have to
thought
just
where we
define the
start. We
problem.
define the problem, but be even
Yes,
more specific.
I think
When
we should define the problem.
When we invite neighbors to come and talk,
Then we define a problem.
it's not to talk about all of the traffic problems that they're having. It's how did they utilize this program successfully or unsuccessfully? Where were the flaws? What are the areas of improvement? A really narrowly tailored invitation for discussion. And if it and if it goes down a rabbit hole of,
Mike
and,
will-
Waze is doing this and Google Maps is doing that, we have to bring it back to
Exactly.
where in this program did you hit a speed bump?
So
to speak.
Right.
I just want to ask James, staff, so if we
You have to
did,
make your comment.
I will,
too.
but that's why I want to start with a question. If we did do a study session, would staff, does that take time? I mean, can we bring Cedric in? Can we get the data that we
Well,
want?
I think Cedric in is a necessity.
Right,
To me, it would
I
be.
know that, but that's why I'm
Oh,
asking.
okay.
Staff is
If he's not
before,
here, what's the point?
right, but that's why I want to make sure that we're not,
Yeah, we could go ahead and initiate that first step, and I think that makes sense. To
Define the first
understand
step
the
as you see it.
Pardon me?
what do you
Define the
hear
first
as the
step
first
as
step?
you see it.
Holding a study session to have a chance to better understand the document itself, perhaps ask questions of staff before the meeting, have the city's traffic engineer available at that meeting, and I think that was very well said. Let's not get into the weeds on the first step. Let's define what the problem is and what the goal is.
Okay.
Then we can decide how to move forward.
Yeah, let me, because my feeling was, I think what's been said is, it's page 6 of this document, which is a summary of the planning process. I mean, it looks reasonable enough. I'm a computer science guy, so it's like logic fall.
Step by
These steps up, I can do that, right? But I didn't know, okay, but, like, and then I thought of University Avenue, or, right, that was, people are concerned about, well, did they file a complaint? Yes. Did the traffic, what are the steps that should have happened? I read this document, traffic enforcement was supposed to write a report, did it? I mean, it's an interesting thing of, does this get followed, or is it just we're kind of winging it as we go each time?
Well, in short, the NTMP is based on a neighborhood taking a proactive first step to initiate the process.
Right, they issue a complaint, right?
Well, I think it's a little more than that. I think they need to initiate an application process.
Well, okay. So anyway, so for me, that's when I look at is really to define, let's talk with Cedric, let's go through this
Right, how
and
the
really understand it.
application's happening.
Right, exactly.
And to be, just a heads up as we get into this, the cost is one thing, but really it's, if you can get 51% of the neighborhood to agree to want to do it, and then more critically, it's, well, where do these devices go? And then all of a sudden it goes in front of one house, and that resident doesn't want it in front of their house. And
Right.
So I have a clarifying question for staff, because at some point, either in a staff report, or maybe Cedric did it orally, I know that there was a review of the numbers with this commission. And so, and I don't, of course, I have short-term memory loss, which means I can't remember anything for the last 2 years, but I do recall that there was a number stated on the total number of applications received, the numbers that had made it through the first step, and the number that made it through the second step, and the number that had actually been implemented. So we've seen it, but obviously, none of us remember those numbers, but hopefully there's a staff report, or Cedric has those numbers handy. He can give it to us, because somebody, either it was written or it's oral, that we did get that. And that was probably 6 months ago.
When Cedric was here and gave us a briefing.
It was at some point.
It was about a year ago.
Maybe it was a year ago.
So are you suggesting then that we have that the first step is that we have a session here with staff and with engineers and us, and just sort of try to define the problem?
I would like to understand the process better. I mean, rather than reading this document and going, okay, I'm not sure what it says that, or how it gets followed, or,
Understand, like on page 6?
Yeah.
process? I think it goes a little deeper than that. That's just, how does it get implemented in the first place? But what about, now you've defined all these, now what about
well, then that's
solving
the next
problem?
question, right? Is then, what are the problems with that process?
So Jerry, what we're saying is I think the first process is just to
Okay.
get the data, get the information, and then amongst us figure out, if we can, what the problem is or problems are.
Right.
And then we take the next step, what we think from there, because we don't know what the problems are, so we cannot make a decision after that, so.
Yeah, because
We need to make a
So,
motion.
yeah, I was going to ask
15
James, do we need to make
It
a
was just a
motion if we
discussion,
want to,
right?
or do we want a consensus, or what do you want?
No, I think we should make a motion to get this officially
Okay.
underway.
I mean, I heard a lot of things. Are people gravitating towards, let's define the problem, get more information, and do it through a study session
think
as
so.
part of a commission?
Yes.
Which we invite
Invite
Cedric.
Cedric.
To be
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
You'll second that. That was a motion.
Can I make a motion?
What he said.
What he said.
Well, no, can you as the chair make a motion?
Can I make a motion? as
Sure,
chair?
of course.
Yeah,
All right.
okay.
Not disenfranchised.
All right. Any more discussion?
And are we getting any public input in that?
That would be part of a study session.
Okay, so so it's.
Right, that's part of the process,
Yeah,
right?
it's a study
Study
session.
sessions, there isn't a public.
They'll pray that we don't have a packed house.
No, that's true, because I've given public.
We can
comment.
ask for public comments during a.
On the-
Well, maybe
during
for
study
the,
session.
maybe for sort of a kickoff study session meeting, it's just more of a study meeting for discussion with the traffic engineer and the commission, and then we can move forward with.
Right, and then
Yeah.
maybe have one
I would
with,
start with the small.
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
start with this one.
Okay.
okay.
All in favor?
Say it.
Is there,
Second.
all in
There was a
favor?
second.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
All right, great.
Aye.
Aye.
Who did the
No,
second?
Rooney did.
I'm willing to
Malcolm
bet we
did.
can improve
I
on a
did.
15-step
Motion
process.
passes 7-0.
Absolutely.
So, of course, Mr. Chair and Commission, the scheduling of this will be dependent on the traffic engineer's availability and his schedule.
Absolutely.
After
Okay.
he solves the El Monte stoplight problem.
The D intersection, it was fixed, so it became an F intersection, yes.
So I'd like to move on to discussion item, the second one, which is the Loyola Corners, item 4 on our agenda. And the only thing that I had a comment was, I thought at the last meeting was to talk about whether to add money into the CIP. That was the topic area.
And I brought the CIP status report.
Because what was written here is the discussion of the traffic circulation with regard to the pending bridge reconstructions.
Right, you were suggesting that we add it as one of the.
Items into the
discussion
CIP. I just want to make sure that
That's the idea.
that's what we're talking about, not looking at the traffic circulation of Loyola Corners, but really to add into the CIP a traffic amount of money so that they could do the traffic study if needed in the spring of 2016.
Right. I think that's what we thought as well. So,
Okay.
and that can be considered as part of this
So that's why I
discussion.
want to make sure everybody,
Yeah, because the idea was just to kind of, because we couldn't vote at that time.
Right, we
Right,
could
because
say
we
that.
had
For
to
it.
get it in there.
right.
And put it as a formal.
Okay, so staff, do you have anything more to add than what was written?
All yours.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
No, well, how much money is required for a
Well, it would
study?
just be,
If we're going to make a recommendation.
It would just be an earmark or an estimate at this point. I mean, an alternative would be, if the purpose is to understand what the circulation pattern looks like once the bridges are built, to study that at some future date, The alternative would be wait until the bridges are completed and the circulation patterns have been established, and then create a project.
But you can't do that if if that happens, then you have to wait for the CIP to get approved for
catch up
next
to it.
year.
No,
which will
they're
be-
done more frequently than that. They're
Which will
done,
be
they're adjusted,
July.
they can be adjusted at any point, and they're adjusted at mid-year.
Yeah.
Why would we do this? I mean, so a couple questions. One,
Do you
why
want-
do you think we need to do this?
My concern was that Loyola Corners, the bridge projects will be finishing in December of this year. And the CIP goes all the way to 2016 of June 30th. And if we're, at least make a recommendation that there should be money set aside so that if Cedric
an
wants to
issue.
move forward and probably want to define what those steps are, there's at least been allocated, earmarked for that.
So
In
a-
response
a
to the
coup-
bridge
a
circulation
couple-
changing.
A couple thoughts is I think that the circulation is going to evolve in the first
Right.
several months. So maybe immediately after it's done isn't the time frame
Well,
to do
that's-
it. And then the second question is, what would the goal be of a study? I mean, a bridge will have just been completed. It took how many years for the current circulation challenges to be addressed? What's the, what
So
do
I
we
do have a
think, what
public comment.
what do you think
Are
would
we-
happen?
that seems like a conversation.
Yeah.
So let's.
Here's
get the
here's another public comment.
Let's get the
Thank you.
public comment.
So I have two public speakers, so why don't we open up for public comment? The first one being Ted, is it Bacon?
Brown.
Brown?
Brown?
My name is Ted Brown. I live on Country Club Drive in the unincorporated part of the county, the city. I'm also representing the San Antonio Hills Association of homeowners up in that area, about 1,100 homes. And I did serve on the county's roads commission for 10 or 12 years and chaired that commission most of that time. The concern that I would like to bring up, I just gave a copy of a petition that we circulated among the homeowners association. And we have 262 people that responded to it, and also responding were the folks that had managed and owned businesses down at Loyola Corners. And the concern that we have is that on the initial traffic or circulation study that was several years ago, it turned A Street into a one-way street. And we are really concerned that that creates or will create a major tie-up of traffic in that area. If, when the time is right, I could show you on a chart, but it sounds like that isn't what the traffic thing is today. But I would like you to be aware that that we have a real concern about what would happen, not only from the standpoint of tying traffic up. It's 14 streets come together in that area. It's not an easy traffic situation. That one-way A Street would make it much, much worse, in my estimation, and in the estimation of a good segment of the people that use that bridge.
How would it make it worse?
Well, I have a-
Well, I have a question.
are you
Explain to
fin-
me
well,
how
I
it
wanna
would make
sure
it
that he's
worse.
done with his.
I'm sorry.
Are you finished with your comments? Because you have a time limit.
Just about. In addition to
And then you can ask.
the
Necessary?
traffic tie-up there, I'm concerned about the safety issues, particularly for people on bikes if you go to a one-way A street. You know, it's sort of good that there's a hospital only 2 or 3 miles away. I shouldn't say it that way. But there is a safety issue there for bicycle people.
Okay, so now you would like?
So which way do you think the one-way was proposed, and why do you think it's a problem?
It was proposed one way to come from the county side across the bridge and go up A Street. That was to be a one-way street. The other coming in
But the bridge would still
across
be
the
two-way?
bridge.
The bridge would still be two-way?
The bridge would still be two ways.
So we're talking about 100 yards of pavement that would be one-way, is that right?
Yeah, but what it does is it means that the people getting out of the country club area have to cross the people that are trying to get in. Right now, they're parallel paths, but have to cross it twice, make a sort of an aid in there.
When you did this petition, was anybody there present to share the perspective of why an A Street one-way would make sense? Or is this just mainly the fear of the county residents that they don't like the proposal of what the city's going to do?
My personal feeling of why they did that was probably to leave a couple more trees in where the road is. And I could be wrong on that. I read the study. I'm an engineer in that,
Okay.
not just traffic, but, the study said, well, it only takes 14 seconds more, but it creates a couple cross places, and it did not address what happens when signal lights get swamped out. And you can only do so much with signal lights.
Okay.
And
Any other, I mean, this is not really what
No,
we're
thanks.
discussing, but thank you for sharing.
So that's what I was just saying, that, that's not what our
Right.
discussion was for tonight, so.
I do have another speaker, MJ Payton.
Thank you. I'm MJ Lopayton. I live on Fremont Avenue, and so I'm a neighbor. And I was just curious on what the commission was just going to be discussing for this topic, because it wasn't completely clear to me. I think that it's possible, and Jim, I don't know, or James, I'm not sure this is true, but the staff report said that Fremont Bridge would be finished in the fall of 2015, but I know that the bid is just going in before the council on Monday. So I think that may be a very aggressive end. I believe the end of the Fremont Bridge project will probably be well into 2016. So while we are very concerned with traffic calming on Fremont Avenue, it's another one of those streets like you were talking about before, I would urge that we would do the traffic study, but it might be delayed because I think that the bridge won't be done very soon, and then there will be some adjustment. And then we would love to see a traffic study and love to see more traffic calming on our streets.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to close public comment.
So, thank you for the comments, and I think everybody was confused, just like we were up here, a little bit on what the topic was, because we had specifically asked for this to come in front of us tonight so that we have some option of looking at a study once the bridge is done, and not define a timeline, because I think engineering would be more accurate in defining when is the right time for that study. So I think that discussion is not on the one-way traffic or the bridge. The discussion I think we wanted to do tonight was just to make sure, if James says it can be added anytime, I'm okay with it, but I do want to make sure there is some provision in the future that if engineering thinks, there is an issue, we need to jump on it, they have the ability to do that. And I think that was my understanding of the discussion tonight. Just wanted to wrap that.
So I think there are two issues. One is I think we have to have a ballpark cost estimate of what this would be. And I'm presuming that if this goes on, something has to come off. And so I imagine, maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's a question for staff, but I'm okay with it going on, but we probably should have a further discussion of what comes off.
Correct, what the
And
cost
I don't think we can even do that until we know what this is actually going to cost.
And I thought, yeah, that was the
Estimate.
idea, but we
Right.
haven't gotten that info.
Phoebe?
I understood this. James seemed pretty sanguine that there's money around if we need to do this. I'm not sure if it is a balloon, and if you pinch one end, we've got to bulge out the other. I'm not quite sure about that. I also am not sure that the scale of the money involved is significant. I think if we're talking about some hours of Cedric's time, we're not talking about repaving downtown. So I'm content with that. I can certainly support and would support recommending to council that an item be added to the CIP to respond to any traffic needs that arise from these two bridges which are completing, and where, as you said, we want to get it in the CIP early so that there won't be a delay later if we need it.
Jerry? John?
I would agree with Phoebe. You know, the city manager has discretionary budget income, something like $25,000 or $50,000. You know, it's not clear to me that this would be internal or external. But if we're going to take the belt and suspenders approach, we might as well at least, A, get a number that it would be and recommend to council that they do include it. And that way, you know, at least we've set it aside with the hope that either it doesn't get used or it's reflected all
What
internal.
would be your recommendation for timing?
Well, I think we included in the 2016 and if it slides, it's going to slide. You know, projects in this town slide all the time.
Well, leave it for
In my
engineering
life,
to
too,
decide.
I noticed. Projects in my life slide the same way.
Should leave it for
So-
engineering to decide when, or if, you know,
Well, that-
neighbors.
I mean, that's usually what happens, right? It's just
Yeah.
a matter of just having the funds there so people are aware that that's something
Yeah.
that can be
Yeah.
accessed. Ken?
Yeah, I don't think we're having a timing discussion. I think we're having a let's provide the funds so when it's necessary discussion. And I'm in support of that. I don't think, I mean, it would be nice to see what somebody's ballpark is, but it just can't be very expensive. So I don't have an issue with it.
Does that help? I mean, I know when I spoke with Cedric about this, that was his concern, was that there'd be funds available in the CIP,
Okay.
so that if he wanted to act on something, it was already pretty much pre-approved.
That would be the way to do it. And you are correct. We do formally reevaluate the CIP annually, so that would be May, June of next year. But we also look at it mid-fiscal year, and in urgent cases, we can add capital projects when we need to.
Okay.
But no, formally, it should be done annually, so we could include it, I think, with this year's recommendation still for our CIP. The only issue on the estimating the budget, I mean, it could be a $25,000 to $50,000 project, is whether identifying what you think the scope is. Is it just reevaluating the existing circulation patterns, say 6 months after the bridges are built, or is it reevaluating the entire concept of a one-way A street, which really that project is not on the books because it was integral to the sidewalk and streetscape redevelopment project, which has essentially been tabled. So there's nothing happening with that A Street one-way project.
Yeah, when I spoke to Cedric, it was to do anything with A Street, he had to have a study. You can't just decide, going to make A Street 2 Street, one way, whatever. You have to study the whole thing. And
But that's-
I would
right.
let Cedric define what he's.
Yeah, but I think the initial study is just to see what the impact is once the bridge comes in.
Right,
Then
once
if
the
this-
bridges are finished.
Yeah, but if the
my
study
point,
then
Mr.
comes
Chief.
back and says, okay, now we need to that's a separate thing.
Exactly.
So we are just asking for that initial study to take place right after or whenever they think is the
Some period
right
of time after
Yeah,
that.
after the
that
bridge is done.
Cedric,
And that's-
it
That's
doesn't
all
mean that
we
it
are
has to
asking.
happen, right?
Yeah, it might be that things are going smoothly. Who knows?
And that's fine, and that's good, but that's an important distinction, because the A Street one-way was very controversial, it's very extended. That's a very different discussion, whether it should be one-way
Correct.
west,
That's a-
one-way east.
Right, exactly. That's not, the item was really so that Cedric had funds available when those bridges are completed, that if there becomes an issue, he has the ability to use that.
Correct.
Well, I might even say become an issue. I mean,
Okay.
we know that the bridges are going to change things. We just
We
don't know
just want to know how
much.
they're changing.
And
You
if
know,
that's the case, and we know Loyalist Corners has an unusual circulation pattern, to say the least, and there will be future development coming up there, it would be good if, I certainly would not say look at A Street. I would say to Cedric, would you look at as part of what the bridge is generating, your overall analysis of how we could improve the circulation in Loyola Corners. And then he can say, I need a study that will show me how many cars are passing here and what the turns are and who is not turning. That would be his point, because once he has the data, then he could begin to make recommendations.
But that would be
So I have a
second.
question. We've missed out, at least in part of the opportunity. Usually, when you have these things, you do a before and after.
Ah, yes.
And in this case, we have now lost the opportunity for at least a portion to do the before. And so, I'm not trying to be a nitpicker here, but, you know, one of the questions is always, has it gotten worse or has it gotten better?
But I thought there is
And
some study.
unfortunately, my question is, do we somewhere have a set of data that's reasonably current that we can compare, if there's a study done, that we can compare what the new situation is and the traffic versus the old?
But didn't the bridge people did this
I think
study?
they have a study.
Well, I mean, I'm just asking, because that would be
And I know
helpful.
that that corner has been studied for traffic so much, and technically there hasn't been any development there, and the neighbors have been the way they have been. So it's not, whatever change is going to happen after these bridges come in,
Right.
or whatever development comes in. So I think for now we need to be really focused on what the process is. Whatever study is there, they're going to look at it. If it's not done, then it's not there anyways. But we should be focused on that. We just want that allocation of funds in case we need to have engineering look at it. That's it.
Do we need to have a vote?
Yeah, what do we need from us?
Do we have to
You have
vote
to
on
put
it?
on your,
Do we need to say something, or do we just
In
allocate
terms of
it?
taking action this evening?
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, well, there should be a motion
Okay.
to allocate money in the
Do we specify the amount?
2016-2017 CIP,
How about just
15,
an appropriate,
16.
an appropriate amount?
2016-2017.
Not to
It's
exceed-
15 and 16, right?
Well, that's
Not
this
to
year. You want it
exceed
this year?
50K or something.
No, not this year. It'll be for
It's coming up, right?
Yeah, that would be
I think it's
this
for
this
16.
fall, next spring is 15-16.
Yeah, when's the bridge complete, right? The bridge is supposed to complete in December of 2015, is what I heard from.
No.
But we're a little skeptical
We're a
about
little
that.
skeptical of that, but if it slides, right?
Yeah, but the study would still be like, it'll slide, it'll be spring, and then you'll need the study in summers anyways, so.
Okay.
That's what they're claiming,
So
for the
then,
Fremont Bridge, not for the larger one.
It's the Loyola Corner, it's the bridge across Foothill that I'm more concerned about than I am
And that's
Fremont.
not happening in 15, that's
That's
happening
not
in
going to finish in
16.
15.
Okay.
They both
That's going
have
to finish in the summer of 16 or something.
Right, for this survey.
I think in either
Right.
case, we are
Right.
looking at that year anyways.
So I move that we recommend to City Council that a certain amount of money, as defined by staff, be put aside for traffic engineering studies to address the changes that are created or not by the new bridges that are going across at Loyola Corners.
Is there a second
I'll second.
And
discussion?
You have an amendment?
I'd like to say a study as deemed necessary by staff, if deemed necessary by
By
staff.
engineering, yeah.
So that we're not saying it happens only if staff deems it necessary.
well, it'll be in the CIP, so that's presuming that it's dollars that's coming from somewhere from
It won't
another
get-
project
it
that's
won't
going to be
get spent.
available. So.
Okay,
It has to be allocated. It won't get spent if staff doesn't think it's
Okay.
necessary.
Right.
Right.
Well, a little bit different. We wouldn't put it in our CIP if we didn't even know that we wanted to do it yet. Putting it in the CIP, and we're allocating dollars because we're intending to do it.
Right.
It implies that we are going to need something in
Okay.
response.
It could be defunded if that changes.
okay.
Right.
I guess I'm just trying to clarify that we're not trying to, as the PTC, we're not trying to be presumptuous and say, we know it's necessary. We're making this recommendation because we believe that if staff deems it necessary, that
The money
we
should
think
be there.
it's important that funds be available. So
money
it's just a clarification that it's the staff's decision to proceed with it. It's not our recommendation to proceed
At
with
their
it.
discretion.
It's,
So does
right.
it need to be in the motion, or is the way it's worded.
Well, that really sounds like we should wait and decide if we think, I mean, that's kind of contrary to saying it needs to go in the CIP next year.
Yeah, because John, I want to clarify one thing on this. I know what you're saying, and we did say that if it's needed, but what the motion we are making is, we are making an assumption it's needed.
Fine.
And if
Okay.
it's not needed, it can always be defunded. But right now, we're making an assumption, and maybe even if it's not needed, it's a good data to collect as to what's happening in those 11 streets there.
Okay.
So I think that's
I would therefore respectfully withdraw my
okay.
Proposed amendment.
proposed.
I have
Any-
seconded that.
Yeah, second. Any other further conversation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0.
Mr. Chairman,
Opposed?
just to clarify, I didn't get which fiscal year that was?
I made the motion, and Malka seconded.
I know, but what
Which fiscal year?
Oh, a fiscal year, 16, 17,
Yeah.
because we can't do 15, 16 because it's already been done, and it's not going to be finished. 16, 17, please.
Because the bridge isn't going to be done
Yeah.
before then.
Well, one of them.
We know
won't.
how
Oh,
building industry works, so.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Exactly. All right, next up is Commissioners' reports and comments. Does anybody have anything? The only thing I would like to mention is in the Town Crier, there was an article about the Airbnb at a location of a house, the party.
The party house?
Was that your
And if you-
house?
No, it was not. But what I would just remind everybody was at the Planning Commission meeting that was down in Newport, that was one of the topics that they brought up was.
The one you were mentioning.
And I
right?
mentioned that afterwards, that was something. So it was interesting, when we talked about it, like, we don't have anything, and yet here
Here it is.
Here it is, so it's a.
You thought you didn't have anything, but in
Mike,
fact.
was that strictly coincidental?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm just checking.
I didn't.
He was throwing the party.
So, and just to share, we are researching that on two fronts. One is what you can do from a zoning ordinance, minimum stays in a residential district. The other is from sort of a TOT, visitor
Yeah.
stay.
Any other comments? Any potential future agenda items? Seeing none, I adjourn the meeting.
Yay.
Thank you.
Good job, Mike.